Good evening, everyone. My name is Gordon McMillan. I'm the manager of capital projects here at the town of Newmarket. Thank you for coming out to the Northwest Quadrant Trail Phase 5, the Public Consultation Center. Thank you for attending. Before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge your local ward councillor, Christina Bizance, is in attendance. And I know that Mayor John Taylor was planning to attend, but he is double booked and he has to speak at another engagement. So I know he was planning to attend, but he cannot make it. So just wanted to thank you for coming out and for to hear your feedback and to try to answer any questions that you have. The town is very committed to community engagement, and we're looking forward to hearing any comments from yourself. You'll notice there's a chat function at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit some questions, and Amanda Lee from our communications department will read out the questions at the end, and we'll try our best to answer those questions for you. And having said that, I'd like to also mention that our Director of Engineering, Rachel Prudham, is also in attendance. So enjoy the presentation and ask any questions that you have. And having said that, I'm going to pass it over to Mike D'Artizio from Stantec, who will give the presentation. So back over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Gord, and nice to meet everyone virtually. It's my first virtual public consultation center, so hopefully this will be fairly smooth. I would prefer seeing everyone in public, but this works well. I also want to acknowledge a few other Town and Newmarket staff that are joining us that will be involved with this project, including Mike Ashworth and Eric Engman, who will be acting as the project manager from the town side. So Amanda, if I can ask you to bring up the presentation, I will give a brief overview of our design intent, our design approach, team members working on it. Then I'll show some contextual images of where the site is located and show where we're currently at with the design process. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Amanda. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Mike D'Artizio. I'm a landscape architect. I have about 30 years experience, and I work at Stantec Consulting. And we have, my team and I, we have quite a bit of experience in trail design. In fact, we worked with the town of Newmarket from the initial phase 1 of the Northwest Quadrant Trail and the environmental park, which you see photo in this slide here. So that started, the design started back in about 2007. Construction was a couple of years after that. And then the subsequent phases up to phase 4 were constructed in the following 7 or 8 years. And we were retained earlier this year to work on the design for the phase 5. Our team also, other than landscape architects, we have an arborist on board. We have a civil engineer that will be working on the grading design, a water resource engineer, which will be helping us with permit approvals for water course crossings with the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority. And we have a structural engineer to assist us with any structural items such as retaining walls and bridge approaches. Next slide, please. So before I show the design, we get very excited with designs because it's not only something that we design, but we actually participate. I'm an active trail user. I cycle and walk both the existing trails in Newmarket as well as in my neighborhood. So it's an amazing way to connect people with nature. And when development happens, you know, residential properties eat up a lot of the natural areas. So I applaud Newmarket for preserving not only Peggy's Wood, but implementing so many trails for residents to thoroughly enjoy. And with these trails, there's the obvious physical benefits that you get through walking and cycling, and also the mental health benefits, just taking a break away from your day-to-day life and your day-to-day stresses and just taking a walk through nature. Especially during these COVID times, there's limited things we could really get out and do these days. So trails are increasingly important, same with public space. Our approach also, we aim to minimize disturbance to the natural environment. So putting a trail in is some disturbance to the environment, but trails in fact guide people so that they use where we plan the trails. So most people stay on the trail route and fewer people walk through what could be a more sensitive environment and potentially all over the area in an unstructured manner. And finally, we try to maximize accessibility so that the people of all physical abilities have the chance to experience such a wonderful natural asset. Next slide, please. So what the slide here in front of us, it's a good way to see the overall trail network that the town has proposed. So this is the Newmarket's Active Transportation Implementation Plan. The red lines represent existing trails, and the other colors are different phases with different short or medium or long-term proposed trails, future trails. And the section that we're focusing on this evening is the Northwest Quadrant, which is located right at the top left-hand corner of the screen, just east of Bathurst and north of Woodspring Avenue. Next slide, please. So this is more of a detailed, this is a more detailed plan of that plan we were looking at earlier, showing the specific site. And you can see Clifford Perry Place on the top left, and the trail is actually that we're proposing is outlined with a purple color. So that is the proposed trail that will be that we've been working on. Next slide, please. And this is the specific area, the red representing the proposed trail. The yellow orangey color, those are previous phases that we've worked on in the last decade or so, phases 1 to 4. And this proposed trail provides a wonderful link for neighborhoods that were not directly connected to this, to the Dave Kerwin Trail. And you can see there's 2 neighborhood links, one off of a walkway block through Clifford Perry Place, and the other one at the cul-de-sac from Art West Avenue. Along with the 2 neighborhood connections, we've had to implement 2 bridges to get across the watercourse crossings. These are pedestrian bridges only. The trail itself is supposed to be 3 meters wide, asphalt, similar to the previous 4 phases of the Northwest Quadrant Dave Kerwin Trail. And the bridges are also going to be 3 meters wide. They'll be clear span with minimal damage to the understory and water courses. So when we stake out these trails, we take into consideration a number of things. So it's protecting the environment, maximizing the trail experience, providing a direct route, keeping it as safe as possible, minimizing the slopes and gradients so a lot of people could use it, providing an adequate setback to rear lots, providing an adequate setback to the water courses. So we've already had a number of site walks and preliminary trail stakeouts with the various number of people, including the entire team that I mentioned earlier from Stantec. Team members from the town, our geotechnical engineers, surveyors, and members from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, which is providing us guidance with the spanning of the bridges for watercourse crossings, if culverts are required, what we can do, and ways to minimize damage to the environment. So the trail has been preliminarily staked out, and we've really tried to minimize the amount of impact to trees. That's not to say that there won't be an impact. Putting a trail through a wooded area will have some impact. But again, we try to minimize damage to larger trees and more sensitive trees. Some of the challenges in terms of grades, the most obvious one is the grade change from Clifford Perry Place down to the first bridge on the left side of the screen. There's a significant grade change. So what we're proposing to do is plan a switchback. And the switchback, for those that don't know, is basically a zigzag path which follows the contours and provides a reasonable slope. What we have so far is approximately 7% slope. We have flat landings wherever there's a turnaround. These pathways will need to be supported by walls. And what we're proposing are armor stone walls, similar to the switchback we designed off of Emma Broadbent Court at the top right-hand corner of the screen. And these walls, they fit in naturally, they have more of a natural feel to it, and they blend in nicely with the environment, and they provide the function of a retaining wall. Above the walls, on the downslope side of the trail, we're proposing guardrails to keep it safe, keep people on the trail. And we're also, there would also be handrails. So as you're going down the switchbacks, you have something to hold on to. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do now, that's overall in a nutshell, the design approach. What we have here are some sample images. Most of these images are from the previous phases of the Northwest Quadrant Trail. So there's a few key design features, and one, of course, the most noticeable one is the trail itself. It's a 3-meter wide asphalt trail. The length of the trail for this is approximately just over 1 kilometer. I think it's 1.1 or 1.05 kilometers in length. So you can see this is 3 meters wide. This is phase 2 of the trail that was just a little bit north of Environmental Park. Again, we keep the slopes relatively flat to keep it as accessible as possible. We zigzag around a little bit to avoid cutting down the trees. We provide a little bit of a recovery zone on either side of the trail, so there's not a steep slope immediately adjacent to it. Next slide, please. So this is the switchback at Emma Broadbent Court. The one we're proposing will be taller. This has, I think, one or two switches to it, but it has all the same ingredients. So you can see on the left side, that's an armor stone retaining wall. So we'll be proposing something similar to that. You can see the trail coming down at a grade. This one's a little bit steeper. Well, I think we're able to achieve slightly less steep grade to the trail. And then we have a guardrail. Now, we haven't selected the materials or the design yet, but basically a guardrail here is a timber rail, which keeps people within it. And what's not shown here, because this, I believe, was in construction photo, is a metal handrail to hold on to as you're going down along the switchbacks. Next slide, please. This is a project I did in Richmond Hill quite a few years ago, but I just wanted to show it because I think this photo was taken within a year after construction. And it was more of an open meadow, not so much of a wooded area. There are some woods in this, but you can see how quickly the switchback, you can see it in the background. It's a diagonal handrail you could see, and then the armor stone, and then back to the left. Goes back and forth a few times up a fairly steep slope, but I feel that it's a pretty, fits in nicely with the context. And that's the same idea we're planning to do. With this Northwest Quadrant Trail, because it's a wooded area, the spaces between the zigzags would be planted. So any lost trees, we would like to propose some compensation trees to both provide some natural plantings as well as some screenings and to fit the trail in nicely into the context. Next slide, please. We are proposing 2 bridges at the 2 watercourse crossings. They will be the same style that we're proposing. This one just shows 2 different styles that we did in the past. The one on the left is the Tom Taylor Trail west of Fairy Lake pedestrian bridge. It's a 3-meter wide bridge. It's coated with a protective coating called the Line-X product. The one on the right, that was Northwest Quadrant Trail Phase 5 within the wooded area. That was a Corten steel. I'm sensing or will likely be proposing the style similar to the left, but I showed the image on the right because it's very similar to what the conditions are for the Northwest Quadrant Phase 5 crossing. You can see it's crossing a small little creek within a wooded area. Next slide, please. In terms of site furniture, well, today we're not proposing any benches. We're not encouraging people to stop along the route. It's predominantly a walking, cycling trail for people to get active and not to create stopping zones. So the only 2 items we're considering currently, and I believe the one on the left is an absolute. They're P gates at the 2 pedestrian connections to the 2 neighborhood links. And these P gates help to control traffic. They allow for pedestrians and cyclists only, and then they could be unlocked for maintenance vehicles to open them and provide some maintenance to the trails. The image on the right is a triceptacle for waste and recycling, and that's also a consideration for to be located at the 2 neighborhood links to allow people to place their litter in there before they enter the trail or as they're exiting the trail. Again, aiming to minimize any impact or littering within the trail, within the wooded area itself. Next slide, please. I just want to bring this plan up. It's got a lot of detail, but it's just showing you where we currently are. We've taken an alignment that we've proposed, and we're starting to work out what the grades will be, what the specific alignment changes will be, the dimensions, the length of the bridge. So that pretty much shows the trail length for the entire trail. The green zones are areas that we need to add a little bit of fill material. Red is where we need to cut into the slopes. Yellow, which is a bit hard to see, but those potential locations for those armor stone retaining walls. And the dark lines at the bridge crossings are the bridge locations. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's an overview of what's being proposed. At these meetings, we frequently get questions, so I'm going to ask myself the questions and respond, and then we'll open it up to take to address your questions. So if we can go to the next slide. So what is the length of the trail? The trail we're proposing is 1.05 kilometers as part of the Phase 5 trail. Next. Will an environmental assessment be conducted? So I spoke to our environmental assessment planners in our office, and they have confirmed that because an EA is not required and that this project is considered pre-approved, basically we need to do public consultation. But since the multi-use trail is off-road and not within a right-of-way, it is exempt from the EA process. Next. Which regulatory review bodies are involved? So we've already been involved with the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority. They've walked the trail. We're preparing documents to satisfy many of their conditions. Species at risk, we'll be reviewing the species that are present, and we've already completed an arborist report that have documented the size, the species, and health of all the trees within the general vicinity of the proposed trail route. We'll be consulting with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And definitely last but not least, we will need budget approval by Town and Newmarket Council in order to have this trail constructed. Next. Will lighting be installed? So at this time, there is no lighting that is proposed as part of this project. The need for lighting could be reassessed at a later date with very minimal disruption to the pathway. But just as information, there is no lighting in the first 4 phases of the Northwest Quadrant Trail. And again, no lighting is currently proposed. Next slide. How many trees will be removed? The design is, as I said a few times, it's relatively preliminary. We do have a rough area in mind, and we're starting to draw it out in more and more detail. And I did ask our arborist to calculate based on, they have a system of doing a sample survey and then applying that for the whole Peggy's Wood lot to figure out how many trees exist. And then based on the preliminary alignment we have, we were able to calculate the percentage of trees out of that total wood lot. So to date, we've calculated, it was just under 1.5%. So roughly 1.5% of the trees within the forest trail will be required removals. But just to let you know, there will be some trees planted in terms of compensation planting, as well as just to fit the trail in nicely into the wood lot. Next. Will the existing footpaths be closed? So the existing footpaths will not be closed as part of the project. That can be reassessed to ensure that any construction for the Northwest Quadrant doesn't create any hazards or safety issues, but the first 4 phases of the trail are outside of the Northwest Quadrant area, and the construction will definitely be signed, and all safety measures will be taken as Phase 5 is constructed. Next. Why pave asphalt trails in a natural environment? So this phase of the Northwest Quadrant Trail is being installed as per Newmarket's Active Transportation Implementation Plan and the Peggy's Woodlot Management Plan. These documents have been prepared quite a few years back, and it is intended to connect the Woodland Hills Phase 7 residents to the existing Dave Kerwin Trail, creating an east-west spine to Environmental Park. Having an accessible trail connection to Environmental Park is important as these residents do not have a neighborhood park in their subdivision. The trail is intended to be used for recreation and active transportation purposes while being safe and accessible for all residents. Next, please. And what is the walking distance between Woodland Hills Phase 7 to Environmental Park? So it's 2 kilometers via the sidewalk on Bathurst Street and Woodspring Avenue, and it's 1 kilometer via the proposed trail to the existing Dave Kerwin Trail. Next slide, please. Will the trail connect to other subdivisions in the future? So as per the Active Transportation Implementation Plan, there are several trail connections proposed. However, there's currently no time frame for these projects. Next, please. So at this point, I will ask Amanda to read the chat box and ask the questions. I'll do my best to respond to your questions. However, as Gord said at the beginning, there is an email address and a web link, so you can provide your comments up until next Friday, not this Friday, the following week. So we encourage you, please, to provide your comments. We'll do our best to address as many as possible. On that note, Amanda, if you don't mind reading out the questions, and we'll start the public participation part of this meeting.
Sure. So the first question is, will Newmarket consider an off-leash trail? Oshawa has one named Harmony Valley Conservation Area. It's a wonderful place to visit with our dogs.
Yeah, those are great facilities. My understanding is that this phase of the trail will be similar to the other phases of the trail, which is not an off-leash. But I'm not sure if the town has any off-leash areas in mind or being proposed. If anyone from the town would like to chime in, if you're aware of any, then please do.
Hi, I'm Mike Ashworth. I'm part of the project team. And so as far as that question, right now, all we have is the leash-free dog park. We don't have an off-leash trail that I know of. I can be correct if I'm wrong, but and there isn't one planned at this time, but that might be something that can be questioned or brought up at another date, but it's not particularly for this project.
Thanks, Mike. Amanda, next
Perfect.
question.
Yep, so the next question is, we live at the end of Frederick Curran Lane, and when we purchased, the town had provided trail maps showing that one of the trails beginning by Frederick Curran Lane pumping station. We are navigating a person-made trail access to the trail along the stormwater reservoir, but it's very difficult to navigate by foot. Has or will this area connect to the trail?
As part of this proposed development, it's not planned. We did look at it during review with the town. There were some options that were being considered, but the trail, I mean, given a number of factors, the trail route we selected, we felt was the least intrusive both to the environment and within a reasonable cost as well. Again, I will open that up to the town if they have anything further to add in terms of the connections as per the question.
Okay, just to add to that, it is part of the overall active transportation plan, the ultimate plan for that area, but at this time it's not part of this phase of development. We're aware of that connection and the interest in that area for that, but at this time we're just connecting up the Woodland Hills Phase 6 and 7 to the Dave Kerwin Trail. So it will be coming in the future. There's just no definitive timeline at this point.
Thanks, Greg. Next question, please.
Perfect. So the next question is there a way to create a trail without putting in asphalt? Could we have a natural trail instead that's 3 meters wide, wide enough for 2 people to walk together?
I think this was addressed as part of the Active Transportation Implementation Plan, as well as the Peggy's Wood Management Plan. And so the asphalt was proposed similar to phases 1 to 4. It is also easier to maintain during the winter. I believe these trails are plowed, whereas screenings are more challenging to plow. So I mean, everything is possible to construct, and I can talk further to the town about it, but my understanding is we're going to maintain the same material as for the previous phase.
Yeah, so it will be an asphalt trail because we will winter maintain it similar to the existing Dave Kerwin Trail. And we have also gone to our accessibility advisory committee, and you basically need a paved surface for accessibility reasons, mothers with strollers, anyone in a wheelchair. That's why we are paving this portion of the trail.
Anna, next question.
The next question is, assuming council approval, what is the timeline for this path to be completed, and would any part of the existing trail have to be closed during construction?
By existing trail, I'm assuming you mean phases 1 to 4, which I don't think there's any interference with any of those trails. If you mean the existing footpaths that have been carved through, then yeah, we will discourage people from using that. The construction area will be fenced to deter people from entering a construction zone. What was that? I know I answered the second part first. I'm reading while I'm speaking. And what was the first part, Amanda?
What is the timeline for this path to be completed?
I think my understanding is based on council approval that once the design has been completed, which will likely be early next year, that the design will be ready for construction in the spring. Again, I would have to defer to the town to provide more of a firm answer to construction timing.
Yeah, at this point, there's no budget for construction for 2021, the year 2021. The plan is to start construction in 2022. So complete the design, finish the public consultation, complete the design in 2021 so that we can get to construction in 2022 when the funds hopefully will be available through town council.
Thanks, Gord. Amanda, next question, please.
Perfect. Mike, just a comment. Someone asked if you could speak a little louder.
Oh, sorry. Will do. I'm speaking to my computer, and sometimes it's too loud, sometimes it's too soft. I hope you were able to hear the presentation.
Perfect. So the next question is, would it be possible to include benches so seniors can enjoy the trails as well?
That's something that we didn't encourage for, to deter people from using it as a hangout place, but it's a great idea to have some rest spots. I think that's something that we'll discuss with the town further, and if there's appropriate locations, or if it's something that the town is open to doing, then it's a comment we could try to address. But Mike, I see your.
Yeah. This is something that we have looked at many times on all these trail feet or all these trail sections that we've done. The consensus at the end of the day usually was that it's a safer trail if we don't have the stopping points and areas for people to congregate, especially at nighttime. We're not going to be seen because there isn't going to be lighting. And it keeps people a little bit further away from the houses and stuff too as well, or not inviting people to those areas behind houses where late at night. I understand the concern with having for elderly, whatever, to have a spot to rest. We may look at other alternatives for that, possibly things maybe more naturalized resting spots. If it's like fallen logs, something like that, may not be ideal, but it maybe provide that little bit of seating informally. But again, it's something we can discuss in the future and look forward to.
Thanks, Mike.
Perfect. The next question is, what considerations have been taken for the use of the pathway by people in wheelchairs?
Well, we take that highly into consideration. In fact, the Northwest Quadrant phases 1 to 4, there's what we called an accessible loop, where everything, it was a shorter amount, so it limited the length if someone wanted to do a shorter route, but also the grades were all relatively flat. And by that, I mean less than 5%, according to the Accessibility Ontario Disabilities Act. With this trail, because it is a nature trail, we don't necessarily need to conform to that act, but we still want to as best as possible. As you can see at Clifford Perry, there is a significant grade change. I think it's 10 to 12 meters from the top to the watercourse. So that creates some challenges, and we're trying to minimize damage to the environment. So what we achieved currently is a slope, the maximum slope of about 7%, which is about 2% higher than the AODA, but it's still less than what it used to be a few years ago, which was a maximum slope of 8%. We do have resting spots at every turn of those switchbacks. And for the remainder of the trail, we do stick within the Accessibility Act, which is 5% or less. So I think the majority of the trail will be accessible.
Maybe, yeah, go ahead, Mike. I was going to
Sorry.
say, I know that you were at the Accessibility Advisory Committee. If you could share the comments that they shared with you just regarding that.
Yeah, so we did go to the advisory committee for accessibility, and some of the comments back were specifically around the switchback, that we had originally had 8% and 2% landings every 9 meters, but it was going to create more of like a roller coaster ride going down. And so we were, in speaking with them, we negotiated something where we do a little bit less percentage, but a longer slope. So we're aiming for around 7% slope. It's a longer run with a 2% landing on the turnarounds. And then during in the middle of the forest area, there are grades that they vary between 0% up to 8%, but they're for a lot shorter runs and they're minimal. And so it is still wheelchair accessible. I know the standards have changed for ramps to buildings being a maximum of 5% without any landings, and then 6% max with landings. So we are still trying to stick to as much as we can, but again, it is a natural environment, and we're in a trail system where there's deep ravine lot areas and varying grades and change. So,
Thanks, Mike.
Perfect. So the next question is, will you be cleaning up the old farm fencing materials in the area?
Well, definitely where the trail is going through, I don't know if we're going to be doing anything throughout the whole wooded area, but adjacent to the trail, any potential hazards that are interfering with the trail layout will need to be removed. Mike, I don't know again if the town has what we did for the previous phases. I think again it was just around the trail itself, because there's probably a lot of that fence scattered throughout the whole Peggy's Wood.
yeah, it's an old farm fence that's I guess I'm assuming there's old property lines, and that right now there's remnants of it there. And we've gone through the forest and we've actually run into it in a couple of areas. Sections of that will be removed, but only within the limit of the trail, and also within a safe distance away from the trail, so that we don't have any impacts from trail users. But outside of that, we're not going to be disturbing it, because that'd be disturbing more of the forest ground.
Perfect. So next question is, my main concern is for some families in Clifford Perry Place neighborhood was the lack of a playground. There were talks of possibly building a parkette in this area. Is this still possible?
Actually, I can answer this one, Mike. So actually, I was involved in the original development review of Woodland Hills Phase 7 back when it was first being designed. And at the time, there was no room to actually provide a park in that area, and there still is no room. Although it may appear like some open space that's there, we don't own the land, or there's not significant room to fit a trail and a park in those areas. And there are future phases of park that are going to be added to that development. Just don't know when and at what time. So right now there is no park proposed for that development, and that this trail connection is supposed to be the connection to the environmental park, which was supposed to provide all the amenities that is required for Woodland Hills Phase 7.
Amanda?
Perfect. Wondering if a safe trail along Bathurst will be planned so that we can safely walk along Bathurst without having to walk on the gravel shoulder.
Like I'll send that back to the town. It's outside of our.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear the question.
Wondering if a safe trail along Bathurst Street will be planned so that we can safely walk along Bathurst without having to walk on the gravel shoulder.
Is that coming from Woodland, Woodspring to Bathurst.
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, well, right now we are planning a trail along the edge of Bathurst Street down to Davis from Woodspring Ave, and then across from Davis, on Davis to the existing trail connection on the north side of Davis. And then that's just that one corner piece, and that will be lit. And that's to connect to bike lane on Woodspring Ave, but there's no other trails proposed along Bathurst other than that at this time.
So Mike, the resident did respond and said, yes, it is from Woodspring. So perfect. So the next question is, will the garbage cans be intended for disposal of that sort of waste? Oh, sorry, my apologies, I skipped the question. Is there any phone booth to install on the trail in case of health or accident emergency?
I'm not hearing the question. It was a little bit muffled. Are there any emergency?
Phone booths that will be installed along the trail in case of a health or accident emergency.
None are currently planned. I don't know if it's something that town does with their nature trails.
We don't typically, and this is actually the first I've heard this type of a question. So it's something that we can take back and look at, but at this time, no.
The next question is, the resident is concerned about pet waste. Will there be garbage cans specifically intended for the disposal of this type of waste? Otherwise, people will keep dumping bags throughout the trails.
Right now, I mean, we're proposing the two waste receptacle locations at the neighborhood connections. None are proposed along the length of the trail within the woods.
Sorry, Mike, I think she's talking about dog waste though. We don't put dog waste into our tri-waste.
Okay.
And I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have any dog waste bags accessible on the Northwest Quadrant Indian area. I could be wrong, but I know we have them along the Tom Taylor Trail. And again, that's something that we can look at adding possibly, but it has to be discussed with our operations, whatnot, because they'd be the ones going and putting those up. And it's usually done after the fact.
Okay. Next question is, what is the anticipated foot traffic expected on this new trail?
That's a good question. It's a hard one to assess. I mean, I did walk some of the other phases and it seems to be well used. But then, while we were staking out the phase 5 without a trail, there were dog walkers and other walkers going kind of in multiple directions. So I think people are already using the space. This is really to guide people so that they don't walk all over the grounds and to keep them more focused on a trail. But I don't know in terms of calculating numbers if there's any.
Sorry, Mike. The only way to actually really calculate that is actually there are trail marker counters that we can put in. We usually do that on more of the busy routes like the Tom Taylor Trail. They aren't usually done in this type of a trail because the user rate isn't usually as high as what you would be on the Tom Taylor Trail.
But this is predominantly like neighboring residences that use this trail.
Yeah, local.
Thank you.
Okay. The next question is, there are a number of trees that are marked for removal due to emerald ash borer. Are there a number of these in the proposed trail area that would have to be removed anyways?
I have the list that our arborists prepared, and I do recall that there were ashes, and the recommendations were if they're in a hazard, if they're in the vicinity of the trail, that they were subject for removal. If they're in the alignment, if we had an option to put the trail through one of those trees that had to be removed anyway, that made our choice a lot easier. So our arborists did look at the species of the trees when determining removals and preservation.
Also, when we walked the site, we walked with a couple of arborists, and both the town's arborist and the consultant's arborist. And the trail location that's been proposed is a lot of it is based on the best way to get through the forest without the minimal disruption to the forest. And part of that was going through areas where trees would normally have to be removed anyway, like the ash borer, or trees with ash borer.
Thank you, Mike.
Perfect. The next question is there a way to push the trail further out from the houses along Art West Avenue? At the current design, we would see people walking by specifically in the winter when leaves and bushes aren't covering the view.
Yeah,
Sorry, Mike.
sorry, go ahead.
So yes, we actually, we follow the active transportation plan, and also the Peggy's Wood management plan. However, the Peggy's Wood management plan actually had it a lot closer to the homes. And we also didn't want to disrupt the edge of the forest where it needs the protection. And so what we did is we actually moved that trail a little bit further east of those backyards and got it into the deeper part of the forest, where we're not going to disrupt the fringe of the forest, but also get away from the houses as much as we could. However, we are stopped by the river. So we got as close to the river as we could, that again, minimizing the disruption of the forest as much as possible. So before, I think it was within a few meters away from the backyards. Now it's 42 meters away from the backyards in that specific area.
The next question is, what is the current length of the Dave Curlin Trail end to end?
I don't have that stat off the top of my head. Mike, do you know what it is? I'm guessing phase 1 was about a kilometer. Phase 1, 2 was about a kilometer once you enter the woods, not including environmental park. I think phase 3 was probably another kilometers or a little bit longer with that loop. So maybe 2, so that's 3. And then phase 4 was probably another, like ballpark, maybe 4 to 5 kilometers long.
Yeah, we don't have the exact number, but I can get that in and respond back through a question period, which is usually a week after this is over.
And this will be adding another kilometer.
Once construction does begin, how long will it take to complete?
Hopefully we'll get a good contractor that could do it in a few months. My gut feel would be like one construction season, like from spring to the end of the fall.
So the actual construction would be during like Mike said, one construction season, but there also is a 2-year maintenance warranty where contractor may have to come back in and do some minor repair work. But for the shutdown of the area and an actual full out construction is just one season.
The next question is, I built a winter shack that appears to be on the pathway of this trail. Should I remove this shack?
I'm assuming if it's on town property, any construction or shacks are not supposed to be constructed and will likely need to be removed, especially if it's on the trail route. Mike?
Sorry, Mike. I don't think that the homeowner should be going into the forest and doing any removals. I understand if they did install anything, if it's in their trail route, then it will be taken down and we will be putting the trail in. But we don't promote residents to go and do construction within our trail areas or within the green spaces.
Perfect. The next question is, something else that other trails have that might make the experience more engaging would include natural art, learning from nature post logs similar to those at Prairie Lake. Would this be considered? Bird feeders such as the ones at Rogers Reservoir, etc.
I think it's definitely a good comment, and that we could talk to the town. We could talk and determine if that's something that's in the town's something they want to do. I know at some point we were talking about interpretive signage. I'm not sure if that's going to stay in or out. I mean, we are still reviewing the budget at this point. See what we can and cannot construct. Mike, if you had any comments regarding the question.
I'm not sure if I heard the question correctly, but was it talking about public art or was it talking about signage for the trail?
I think it's talking about public art similar to what's in Prairie Lake right now, or even bird feeders, things like that.
Okay, so in terms of public art, we don't have anything as part of this project. However, that can be brought to our public art committee and let them decide if that's something that we can, if they'll entertain to put public art in this area, or if it is a legitimate area for public art. And that will be decided later, and it'll be done through a separate tender with a local artist. But at this time, there's not anything as part of this project to do with the public art.
So next question is, at the end of Frederick Curran Lane, there is a court-like gravel area behind the water storm building. What is the purpose of that? And is it part of the future plan?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
I'm getting some muffled audio. Yeah, would you mind repeating that?
Sure, sorry about that. At the end of Frederick Curran Lane, there is a court-like gravel area behind the stormwater building. What is the purpose of that? Is that part of a future plan?
I'm not familiar with that element. Mike, are you?
I just can't remember the exact, maybe Eric knows, I can't remember the exact road.
Yeah, I believe that gravel road is actually a stormwater pond access. So it's beyond the sanitary pumping station, and then there's a gravel road to access the stormwater pond for any maintenance.
That's the maintenance access road?
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
What is the approximate time to walk the trail?
In terms of when should it be used?
I guess how long it takes.
Right. So it's a kilometer, I guess. I'm not sure, depending on if you're cycling, if you're walking, but if you're walking,
Depends how fast you walk, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the average person walks about 5 to 6 kilometers an hour. So if you say 5 kilometers an hour, what's that, 12 minutes, roughly the time. So say 10, 15 minutes, depending on your walking speed, would be a good guess.
Okay, the next question is there a plan for wayfinding signage?
I think there is. I guess I think I answered that question. I talked about interpretive signing and wayfinding signage. And that's something that at this stage of the design, we haven't reached that point, but it's something that we will be discussing. I don't think the first 4 phases have any wayfinding signage. So I'm not sure what the town feels at this point. It's still preliminary, but it will be discussed.
Right now there is, sorry, Mike, right now there is no wayfinding signage as part of this trail project, and it hasn't happened in the past. It's not to say it's not going to happen, but we are starting to look at the wayfinding, especially on Tom Taylor Trail. But again, nothing's actually been implemented yet. It's just being discussed.
Yeah, and the longer this trail gets with the more phases, there may be future opportunities where it's more, it's needed more. Whereas opposed when we did one trail, there's only 2 directions you can go, and it's getting a little bit more intertwined, this trail system, which could benefit possibly in the future.
Okay. The next question is, we normally hear coyotes at night. Are there any provisions for our safety on this trail?
We're not addressing that as part of the design. I'm not sure if there's a bigger strategy that the town or anybody else has. So,
This is the first I've heard of a concern with the coyotes, especially on the trails for the trail users. We don't have any at this time, but that's something, again, I can take back and we can discuss and see if there is. I don't know if there's any particular design that can be done to prevent coyotes from crossing the area, but I mean, you are going through a natural environment, which is going to be open to all animals. And we can't guarantee that some aren't going to come and some will.
I guess this is a question related, but have we considered what this path will do to the mental state of the coyotes or any other wildlife in the area?
what it will do to something of the coyotes? I missed a couple of words.
The impact to the coyotes.
Yeah, the impact of the coyotes.
No, we didn't do a study specifically regarding the coyotes. So again, I'm not sure if there are any proposed studies to be looking at impact of the trails. I mean, these trails are not lit at night. It will be bringing some additional people in, and maybe not that much more than are currently using. But, to answer your question, we haven't done a study on that.
Perfect. So we don't have any questions in the queue right now. Oh, there's one more. How are the trails maintained in the winter and will there be snow plows?
Mike, they're currently, I believe phases 1 to 4 are currently plowed in the winter. One of the reasons why they're paved as well. So I'm assuming it'll have the same maintenance program for this 5th phase, right?
I'm not 100% if they are all plowed, but if they are plowed, they are done, I believe, like on a tertiary basis. We are going to be plowing more of the Tom Taylor Trail first before the outer skirts of the other trails are to be plowed. So there's a priority for the main use trails, such as the Tom Taylor Trail.
Perfect. The next question is, I think it's at Mike Ashworth. You mentioned that there may be a park in Clifford Perry Place neighborhood in the near future. I just wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Sorry, I said there was not going to be a park in the Clifford Perry area. The thing is, the main purpose for this trail is to connect Clifford Perry to the environmental park. There is no space that I know of right now for a park within Clifford Perry, within the Woodland Hills Phase 7 development. Although there is green space that may appear that there's space, but it's either it's not ours or it's not wide enough to support a park.
And then someone asked, my apologies if I missed the response. I know the project won't start until 2022, but once it does, how long will it take to complete?
That'll take about one construction season. However, there will be a 2-year maintenance that the contractor will be able to come back in and do any kind of repairs or tree replacements or planting replacements of any kind. But for the main construction, it should only take one season. But again, that's subject to a decent contractor and also decent weather throughout the construction season.
Next question is, could there be consideration made to put any no fire signs on the trails? We do notice sometimes there's kids playing with fire in the forest.
That is something that we can look at doing. It has to be brought up. It's not usually done as part of the project. It's usually again done after the project is complete. Our operations or someone will come in and they would be installing those signs. So we can discuss that through our design and see, maybe we can do it proactively, but we'll have to look into that and we can get back to you on that through the question and answer.
Just scrolling through to make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't think we have any questions. Perfect. So don't think we have any new questions.
I would, if you can put that last slide up, it does have an email and the phone number and the name of the website that you could add questions. Yep. So there's the website's at the very bottom. You can also contact the project manager at the town, Eric, and his email and his phone number are there. And please do so by Friday, December the 4th. We'll review all the questions and aim to address all of them, provide a response. Unless anyone has any other questions or if anything from the town, I'd like to thank everyone. Gord, if you have any closing remarks.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank everyone for the questions and the participation. As Mike was saying, your questions, you can answer or ask them up until Friday, December 4th. The answers will be provided on the town website as well. So if you think of some questions, you can ask them and we will post the answers. And some of the questions that were asked today that we don't have answers, we will try to get answers to those questions as well and post them on the town website. So thank you all for your questions. And if you think of any more, please add them. And I would like to thank again Councillor Pezance for her attendance. And I should have mentioned that the Deputy Mayor and Regional Councillor Tom Bay was also in attendance this evening. So just acknowledge their presence. So thank you everyone for your for your input and participation, and we look forward to future communication with you. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, Gord. Bye, everyone.